So, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for Handmade Chelsea Online. My name is Lucky, and I'm part of the Handmade in Britain team. We are joined by Rhian Wyman, who's going to be explaining some of the work that goes into creating her beautiful throws. As always, this is an interactive session, so please feel free to ask any questions in the chat box provided. I've also provided a link to Rhian's shop, so if you want to go and check out her products directly there, that would be great. But for now, over to you, Rhian.
Hello, I'm Rhian from Rhian Wyman Designs. So I thought within this live session I could give you a little insight to what goes into each throw. Unfortunately, because my studio is in a barn, I don't have any signal, so I can't take you there and show you the loom and what goes on there. So I thought I'll talk you through it instead. So I weave woolen throws. So you can see here, it's a nice little one. So it's not just one throw that comes off the loom. I set the loom up for 8 items. The loom's set up in a collection. So for me to create the warp, these are the warp ends, the little fray bits at the bottom. Those are the ends that go through the loom, where the weft is the yarn that goes through the loom like left and right as I'm weaving. So to set up, when I start warp binding, I have about 1,170 ends, and I have to make sure that each one of these are the same length. So just to show you, when the yarn comes to me, it's on a little cone, and it all arrives on a little strand like this. And then it's down to me to make sure that I have enough ends and that they're all the correct length. So when I'm weaving, I think it's really important to make sure that no 2 items are exactly the same. And that's the beauty of an item being handmade. So even though you can see here that they sit quite nicely together, they're just a bit like brothers and sisters. So I get to design each day when I come to the loom what the blanket's going to be like. So I could have inspiration for my morning walks. So really like the moss collection here, this is because it's more of like a country vibe. I really do get inspired by my morning walks, like seeing like flowers, so it could be like daffodils or bluebells, and then that will inspire me for that day, which is quite nice. And it means also it's really interesting for me, so it means that no 2 days are exactly the same. Even though I might be weaving the same collection, I get to make sure that each one is unique. What I might do is I'll show you a little insight to like the inspiration behind each collection, and then just show you a little bit more detail that you may not notice on first glance. So I currently have 6 collections. I have the Midnight collection, I've got the Cotswolds, and then the one underneath here is the Heather collection. I've got my moss collection. Here you can see this is my Lichen collection, and then this is my Porth Close. So they've all been inspired by different things. I will show you first my moss collection. So again, as I mentioned a bit earlier, the collection is made up of the warp ends and the pattern. So here you can see here the frayed tassel ends here. These are the warp ends. So this is the thread that gets threaded through the loom. So just to show you here, hopefully you can see. It's a bit reflective. But you can see here these strands, well, these threads going through the loom here, that's the warp. So each thread has to be individually measured to a set length, and then they get wound onto the loom and individually threaded through heddles and then through a reed. It's quite time consuming. I find it very therapeutic, and I quite like the fact that I know that once I've set the loom up, I'm going to be creating a collection, and it gets me quite excited. But initially, the setup of the loom takes like 4 days. So as I previously mentioned, in a blanket like this itself, I have roughly about 1,170 ends. That means that they will have to individually be threaded up, but they also have to make sure that they're the set length. So I roughly counted the other day how many times I had to walk up and down my warping frame. So for me to make sure that each one of these is a correct length, I have to do a bit of marching. So in the barn, I'm not sure if any of you've watched my video, but on my website, and I think Handmade in Britain have got a link to it as well, possibly, of a little insight to my studio, so you can actually see me, some of the processes of me making. So I have this massive warping frame, that is like it's a set measure really, and I counted the other day, I got something like 32,000 steps within one warp, so that's quite a lot of walking. But once it's all set up, it's set up for 8 blankets. So yes, so as I was before, I've got a bit of a butterfly mind, so I go on a tangent. But yeah, so this is the moss blanket, well, the collection. So the moss range was inspired by the English countryside. It's quite fresh. It always reminds me a bit of a spring morning, because you've got the beautiful greys coming through with the mixed green. So through the greens here, you can see you've got different flecks. So you've got light green and dark green. And then here you've got the white, which makes it quite fresh, really. The structural weaving pattern of this reminds me of what are they called? Windmills. You know, the sails on a windmill? I'm not sure if you'll be able to pick that up. Can you kind of see there? I think it helps link it a little bit more to the countryside. So this one I'm currently holding up is a single. So you can see that. It's got a nice bit of 2 reds going through there, or 2 purples. So that's one there. And you can see here, so even though this is a moss blanket, I have a moss blanket here, but this one has been inspired, well, it looks slightly different because in the weft, I've put yellow through it instead of the purples, and it's got 2 tones of greys coming through and a lighter green. You can see it there. And this one is actually a double. So when I say like single and double, they're designed to come halfway up the bed, so all the way to the floor and halfway up the bed. But you can use them for like sofas as well, or like the small ones you can actually wear if you fasten them. Right. So that's the moss range. I'll just fold this one back away. I do get quite inspired by just walking around. So my next one, or the next range I'm going to talk about, is my liching collection. So we have an annual trip, me and my family do, to the Hebrides. So the liching collection was inspired by the Hebridean coastline. So here you can see, well, the colourways. Let's talk about the colourway of the weft first. So here in the greys I always think of like the rocks in the colour in the beach, because you've got loads of different mixes of like dark greys and light greys coming in there. And then I've got this massive section of yellow here, which I think is inspired by the lichen on the rock. And then you've got a nice flash of turquoisey blue, which mimics like the crystal clear sea, which is quite nice. And then the structural pattern here is of waves. You can kind of see that. So this is like a honeycomb weave that I've just adjusted slightly to create a different pattern. And it's quite nice. And this one is a small size. If I pop it around this way as well, you can see that.
Rhian, how long does it take you to create one of those from to finish?
So I never create one at a time. So I set the loom up for 8, so that'd be 2 of each design. And then weaving. So weaving a small one like this, this will take about half a day, because I'll only have to wind, so for small, I only have to wind like 9 bobbins. I'll just show you what a bobbin looks like. So when I'm weaving, I have a shuttle. So this is how I weave left and right. So this is what creates the weft. So this is a bobbin. So I have to weave them because they, not weave, sorry, wind them. So they're usually like this. So this is an empty bobbin. So for me to weave a small blanket, I have to use roughly about 9 of these. But it all depends on what colours. So if I have quite a few different colours, I might have to use one of these and then more of the other ones. But weaving back and forth is quite, I haven't got a picture, but it's quite energetic really, because I have a flying shuttle. I have to like throw my arms. So I worked out that it's roughly about 900 times I throw the shuttle for a small throw. And then I'm treadling away, which means that the shafts get to be picked up and put down again. So it's a little bit like pedaling. And that movement I do about 1,800 times on just a small one. So it's quite time consuming. And then once it's woven, that's not just the end. Because I hand finish everything, I will then bring it back to my dryer, not the barn, more of like an indoor studio, quality check it, because I get all of my yarn from a mill in Yorkshire. And when it arrives, sometimes if it's snapped while they've been spinning it, they just knot it. And I don't really want a knot in the blanket, because you can imagine it'd be quite uncomfortable if you were to sit on it and feel a knot. So I sew all those out and then I wash them. So I do the traditional stomping method for washing all the blankets. So they all go in the bath. I go in and stomp around on them, and then they come out and they just go for one quick spin cycle in the washing machine, just to drain quite a lot of the water off it before it then gets stretched onto the tenter frame. And then it's not just finished then. So when it's on the tenter frame, then once it's been dried, it comes back off again. And then I'll just double check it to see if anything's moved, and then cut the trimming off. And then sew my label on, which, believe it or not, this little job can take up to 15 minutes.
Wow, that's amazing. It's a long process and extremely detailed.
Yeah, it is. You have to be quite energetic, but I enjoy it. I find it very therapeutic, because it's not really until it's on the tenter frame that I get to see the end product. Because when I'm weaving it, it gets moved onto the front beam, so it just sort of like keeps rolling around. It's a bit like rollers. So I never really get to see, like, obviously in my mind I kind of visualize what all the colors are going to look like when they interact with each other, but I never know until it's on the tenter frame.
Wow, yeah, definitely. But I mean, how long would you say you've been mastering this technique for?
It's quite hard, because I suppose I studied, I specialised weaving within my first year at uni, and then I graduated in 2014. I did a year of internships with 3 different established weaver makers, which led to one of them me becoming a weaving assistant for a gentleman who wove blankets in Abergavenny. So that was the first time that I'd actually wove on such a big scale. So previously, like at university, we only had small little hand looms. I think they're about 15 or 20 inches, so they weren't very big at all. So suddenly I turned up at this internship and saw this massive loom that was like 65 inches weaving width, and had to go at setting it up. And yeah, basically ended up weaving with him. And then I started off on my own, because once you're weaving with someone else's designs, it's really good, but it kind of stumps your creativity. So I was really excited to start designing my own and have a go at it by myself. So in 2017, I started to weave my own products and start my own brand.
Amazing. So you have a really good solid foundation in it. That's no wonder it reflects in your work. The quality is stunning and the colors are beautiful. Could you explain a little bit about what you have to offer on your shop so people can have a look as you know, what's on offer? How much does it cost?
Oh yeah, of course. So I'll show you. Well, I can show you this one first. So as I mentioned, so this one is a small. So you can just see the size here. It's quite a nice size, really. Like, you can easily wrap yourself up in it. So a small is £210. It's nice and light. I think it's quite nice for a chair. And it's good to keep your like knees warm. So that's a lichen one. I have got two of the small lichen ones. So this one is one that's got slightly a bit more lighter grey, where here you can see this one, you suddenly have got this massive darker section. So you can see that the weave structure is highlighted a bit more here. It's a lot more stronger. And you can see that one there. Then I'll show you. So this is a fourth place one. So the fourth place is inspired by a harbour in Pembrokeshire. And what I really liked is I went down there about, I think it was autumn one year, and the colours in the harbour were so beautiful. So what you had is you had this like wet black line, which I've tried to imitate here on the harbour wall. And then you had this like yellowy, orangey lichen. And then it would go back to the natural colour of the stone itself, so the grey. And then on top you'd be able to see the grass. So what I did is I took that as inspiration and tried to mimic it through a weave. And here you can kind of see that the weave pattern here is quite jaggery. So it's a zigzag, but I was trying to get how like jagged the rocks were within it. So this is a single, which is nice.
And how much does that retail for?
A single is £317.
I mean, these look wonderful, and especially for winter time, perfect time. I think it's the perfect time to have, you know, these kind of large, beautifully handcrafted blankets.
Yeah,
and especially for Christmas gifts. I mean, Christmas is just around the corner, and like, what better way to give someone than, you know, a handcrafted blanket that clearly has taken so much time and effort, so much quality, and so much thinking behind the process as well, which is really lovely. So we're going to have to end the session there. It was so fascinating, you know, seeing and hearing about the inspirations behind your craft. So that's great. And thank you everyone for joining us. We have to thank Rhian for showing us her lovely products. So thank you for that. Please be sure to stop by Rhian's shop on her profile. She's also going to be available for a one-on-one chat after the show. So if you're interested in asking her any questions, please be sure to stop by her shop and engage with her.